What causes a relapse? And what are you supposed to do after a relapse if that's where you find yourself? In this week's episode of Through the Glass Recovery podcast, we're joined by Patti Clark and Dave Davis, who share their experiences. Patti relapsed after 10 years of sobriety and shares what she sees now. Dave went through several relapses before finally reaching lasting sobriety, and the lessons he learned from each relapse are what got him where he is now. Whether you're currently in a relapse cycle or just want to avoid relapsing in the future, this episode is chock full of everything you need to hear.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Julie and Steve. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full there's no space left for alcohol.
One of the most important parts of getting past a relapse is getting out from under the shame. If you're struggling with finding a place you can do that, we invite you to join us at one of our Sober Happy Hour sessions on Zoom. A free support group for anyone in recovery with a focus on connection. Overcoming shame is what we do through meaningful conversation. You can get more information about this free support group on our website, throughtheglassrecovery.com.
All right, welcome everybody to Through the Glass Recovery podcast. This is episode 113. So time is just a flying by, but we are so happy to be here, and we're actually talking about an episode that's a really important one to me too. So happy to share this space with our guests today. Miss Patti Clark is back with us again. I'm going to let her introduce herself first. How are ya?
Very good. Thanks, Julie. Hi, Steve. Hi, Dave. Yeah, today's a big day for me. It's my book launch. I'm leaving from this podcast and going to the bookstore and launching my book, Recovery Road Trip. And this topic is super important to me. It's a topic close to my heart, and it's central to my book as well, Relapse. So a little bit about me. I'm Patti Clark. I was raised in San Francisco. I came to New Zealand in 1992 after traveling for a while, and we're in the process, as we speak, we're in the process of moving to Portugal. We have two sons, and they're both living in Europe, and a grandchild, so we're moving to Europe to be there. So in the middle of everything else, we're packing up a house of 30 years and moving. So when I say I'm manic, I'm really not exaggerating, even though I do exaggerate a lot. My recovery story is not an exaggeration. I was born and raised in a very chaotic alcoholic home. Started drinking and using when I was about 13, was regularly using various drugs and alcohol when I was 14, all the way through school. I was raised in San Francisco in the 60s and 70s, so it was abundant. I got sober just before my 30th birthday, because my mother died of alcoholism, of complications with liver and all the cancers that come with drinking alcohol that alcohol companies don't want us to talk about. And she died when I was 16, but that didn't stop me. So I continued to drink and use until just before I was 30. My sister got sober a couple of years ahead of me. That kind of is tied into that denial clip that we had talked about. And I was sober for almost 13 years. I wanted to be sober for my kids. I was sober through my pregnancy, through raising my kids into school, and then my kids got into school, and I sort of looked around and thought, I'm good. I've got this. And I've read it. I've done the therapy. I'm good. So I started, drinking like a normal person, and that didn't last long. And I was out drinking for another 13 years. And so it was a long relapse. And then in 2014, so 10 years ago on November 1st, I decided, I looked in the mirror literally and said, I don't like you when you drink, Patti. And so I quit drinking again, and I've been sober for 10 years this time.
Awesome. Awesome. So happy that you are where you are now, and just for your willingness to talk so openly about it. That is such a gift to the recovery community. So really happy to have you here. Happy to dig into this topic with you and hear about some of your experiences. Before we get started on all of the topic stuff, though, I'm going to let Dave introduce himself.
Hi. It's good to be here finally. I'm Dave Davis. If anybody's out on the IAS app, I'm Firebird Rising Dave. Been sober for 572 days since March of 2023. I've been on the app since June 2021, so this is a good topic for me. I've reset multiple times throughout that time, but this is the longest I've ever been. I've also been just almost shy of 6,000 days from smoking. So, that was a long time ago. Anyway, it's just been a long time. My wife and I both quit smoking at the same time back then. I'm 60. I just turned 60 years old. A couple of years ago, was diagnosed with autism and ADHD, which is a fun combination to be. My stepsons both are 29 and 32. They are both on the spectrum and have ADHD and have other disabilities as well. Both do not work. My wife is a phlebotomist. She draws blood for a living. She's also neurospicy. She's also odd. HD is what they call it now. So we're a neurospicy family. We have 3 dogs, 2 senior females, a Shih Tzu and a Border Collie. That's a fun combo. And we have a 1-year-old mutt that's a Husky and Labrador mix, and he's hysterical. So it's a
Awesome.
fun group. For a living, I'm a senior database architect. Sorry, forgot the SR on the end of it. That's just recent, the last year, which is kind of cool. I've been with the same company for 12 years. I live in DeKalb, Illinois, outside of Chicago. We moved out here in 2022 to get away from the sprawl. We originally were in Aurora, Illinois, home of Wayne's World. And I do radio podcasts on the side for fun, all sorts of different stuff, photography, writing, art, you name it. I'm in the creative side of things. Yeah. My website, oh gosh, my website is davidbrucedavis.com. So if you ever want to check out any of my music, my videos, anything I've done, that's all out there.
Yeah, I have actually checked that out, and I love your creative side and just all the different art that you produce. It's really cool. So
Thanks.
yeah, we'll make sure we share that link in our show notes along with Patti's book link and all that good stuff. So if you're listening right now, make sure you check out the show notes and you can follow up with these folks and see a little bit about what they're doing. Yeah, so diving into our topic, I think everyone feels a little shaken up when they hear about someone who relapsed after a significant period of sober time. So what caused it? How did they end up going back after making it so far? More importantly, people ask themselves, how do I avoid that? They say hindsight is 20/20, so we're hoping that you guys can share some of what you see when you look back that led to you drinking again. And just as importantly, what lessons have you learned this second time around about how to handle a relapse so it doesn't happen again? Anybody's welcome to start, and we will just take it from there.
I'm happy to jump in. As I said, this is a topic that is very near and dear to my heart. Most of the people that I've spoken to tend to do multiple small relapses. So my relapse is slightly different in that after 13 years, I left for 13 years. So it's kind of an unusual one. But it's really important. And for part of my book, Recovery Road Trip, I interviewed women about why they relapsed and why they came back. So I have an idea on that, but I'm going to talk about mine. The best word for me is honestly arrogance. And I was feeling like, oh shit, I've got this. It really wasn't like, oh my God, I need a drink. It really wasn't that at all. It was like, oh shit, I'm good. I can do this. I was around people. I quit going to meetings. I said this before on your podcast before, but I think it's very pertinent for this topic. I got sober in Tucson, Arizona, with a lot of young women. All the women in my home group were about my age. It was really close-knit, fun, really groovy group. There were probably 30 or 40 women in my home group, all in their, late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s. A lot of outings, a lot of connection. And as we know, connection is key. And then I moved to New Zealand, to a small town, and it was mostly men, mostly pedantic old-timers, real big book thumpers. And when I got emotional at all, I was told, put a plug in the jug, come to meetings. You've got one mouth, two ears. Just listen, come to meetings, you'll be fine. And I was crying, saying, I'm not fine. I'm not fine. And I was just craving connection. And in this new town, the connection that I was a part of were mostly other women who had young children who were drinking. So I stayed sober through my pregnancy, through breastfeeding, through getting my kids into school. My kids got into school. I had time, and cool mummies sitting on their decks drinking good wine. And I thought, oh, I'm good. I've got this. Every morning I did the third step prayer and said, okay, God, I'm turning my life over, but, I'm good. Just, stick with me. And thought, oh, okay, I can have one drink. Okay, I can have a couple of drinks. And then started that whole litany of, only 2 glasses of wine at the after school get together, only 2 beers at the pizza parlor. And then, then I'd go in the kitchen and down another beer. So my husband didn't see me, because that was the agreement, all that fucking insanity, all of those, little deals with myself. It's crazy. So that's what led me into that. We'll go into the other part later. Yeah.
Do you remember the first drink you took?
Yes. Oh, very well. Very well. The first drink I took after being, which is so ironic. I went to India and meditated with Sai Baba, and I had this vision in my vision, which said, alcohol's not the problem, you're the problem. And I thought, oh, okay, so I can drink. Sure.
Wow. Logic swap there, eh?
Isn't that awesome? So my first drink was flying back from India, had a layover in Singapore. And in Singapore, there's a pool at the airport. Really cool airport. And so I sat by the pool on my, whatever it was, 5-hour layover, and got a beer, because I had just done 2 weeks of meditation. Come on. I was glowing in the dark. I was all good. And alcohol's not the problem. So I had a beer, and it tasted really good. And I sat in the sun and I said, oh, I've got this.
Yeah. My relapse story is like a baby version of yours. So I was sober for 14 months, and then I went back to drinking, and I drank for a year. Like you said, most people, it's like the cycle. And I held on for 14 months, and then I drank for a year, and then I got sober the second time. So just kind of a smaller version of what you're describing. But that first drink that I took that kicked off my relapse, like, it wasn't, and I think you said this, it wasn't like a big, dramatic, horrible thing happened and fuck it, I have to have a drink. It was like, I know that I had like kind of a crappy day, but I don't remember what happened. So obviously it wasn't that bad. I just, I was like, I was kind of bumming, and I knew there was beer in the basement fridge. I was like, I'm going to have a beer. And I made the decision, and I went and drank the beer. And I remember drinking it. I remember after I drank it, I took a nap, and I was like, that wasn't so bad. I'm good. I'm fine. I can handle this. I can totally moderate, right? And it took me a while to prove to myself that I cannot moderate. But yeah, it's kind of crazy how, I think that people, when they think about relapse, they worry about something big happening in their life that drives them back to drinking. And it wasn't that for me at all. I was just one day, I was like, yep, good, I'm okay. So.
Yep, exactly. And then for many, many months, I just had one drink once in a while.
Same.
Until I didn't. And then I had 2 drinks once in a while. And then the real kicker for me was when I found myself hiding the wine bottles in the recycling and thought, oh, shit,
Yep.
look what you're doing. Look, but it didn't stop me, I drove drunk, didn't stop me. But by the grace, I didn't hurt anybody. I didn't destroy anything, but I could have, easily could have. And I just sort of limped along. It's not like any big shit happened. I limped along for 13 years saying, even though I knew there was more. I knew that I blossomed in my sobriety. I knew that. But, yeah.
I did the same thing. I limped along, and it was just a little bit, any growth that was happening, which was pretty minimal anyway at that point. I drank a little bit here, I drank a little bit there. It wasn't really super out of control. I knew I wasn't in a great place, but there weren't devastating consequences. So I was like, I'm fine. I just need to back off a little bit. And I do, like you talked about, set the rules for myself. And then about 6 months into that relapse, where I was moderating-ish, my dog was killed. And it was crushing. It was this massive blow to that. I had no idea how to handle emotions. And it was just this huge, massive blow to my whole life. And what I learned that day is if alcohol is on the table as even being an option when it comes to dealing with something hard, that's the first place I'm going to turn. Because I went from limping along, like you're talking about, to drinking a bottle of whiskey in 24 hours and not really stopping for 6 more months. So that scared me because, I could limp along and not really suffer any major consequences. But life happens. Bad things happen in our lives. They just do. Nobody is going to avoid grief and pain and emotional turmoil and, all of those things. And so for me, knowing that I do have a problem with alcohol, if alcohol's on the table as an option, that's the first place I'm going to turn. So it just can't be there. Dave, we've talked a lot. Why don't you jump in here?
I'm learning how to not interrupt people with my ADHD, by the way. So, over the years, I never really thought I had a problem. We all go through that where we don't, hey, we drank. It was part of the, Animal House. I mean, come on, I grew up in that era. So moving out here, I was in heavy metal bands most of my life. So, playing keyboards and bass and stuff like that. Drinking, and we never drank while we played, except for once, which is on video, and it's horrible. But, just over the years, it was like part of the whole genre was, you drank on the side. Went through one marriage, and that was a mess. After 9 years, that was gone. Around the same time my father passed away. I had kind of given it. I quit smoking at that time, quit drinking at that time, and then lost a lot of weight. And then all of a sudden I decided, I can control this. I'm going to start drinking some wine. And then one thing led to another. That went for quite a while. And then I would say probably mid-2000s when I met my current wife. She was not a drinker at all. 100% Irish background. I've got some Irish background as well. So, don't give us a drink. That's my dad always said. So we had, gotten to a point where we felt comfortable after we got married. We had the kids. Anyway, she had the kids, sorry. They were 10 and 13 when I came into the marriage. And we decided, maybe I start drinking again. Hey, I'm going to turn her on to wine. So I had made her an addict.
Oh, nothing like, here, try the thing that I like.
Yeah, commiseration.
Yeah, support my habit by having you join me.
And then when the pandemic hit, it got really bad. I was blacking out. I was drinking a black box every night. And I said, I got to stop this stuff. So back in 2021 was when I tried the app out because AA didn't work for me a couple times. With my brain and the way my brain works, AA does not work for me. I'm sorry, folks. I know it works for a lot of people, but it doesn't work for me. And connection was what I needed, just like Patti. I needed that connection. And I found it through the app. I was real scared at first to type and talk to people out there, especially in 2021. The first person I ever met through the app and friended was Julie. And somebody else named Gemini Mama. I don't know if you know her.
Yeah.
So going back in time, that was back then, and Maka, she was another one. So I had a great connection with them, but I kept resetting and resetting and resetting. I think the furthest I ever got was 45 days, and then I'd relapse. And it was always due to stress with work in the pandemic, because we were all remote. I'm still remote, but and the boss I had was just a bully. And, so the stress that we all went through on my team and the nightly drinking binge was what kept me going back, and it just was like a comfort home to me. And I just got to the point where finally we were moving away from there, moving out to DeKalb. So we bought a house, and I said, you know what, I need to get on this. So we moved in 2022 and 2023. I said, that's it. First day of spring, I'm done. And I've not looked back once. And I really, 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 really tried the NA alcohols. Guess what? There's still enough in there to make you feel horrible. At least for me, it messes me up. I can't drink those. So altogether, I've given that up. My wife will come to it in her own time. She's not as heavy a drinker as I was. So, part of the normal people who can do it normally for a while. But she will give it up one of these days. I know she will.
So what did you do to start coping with the stress then? Because if the stress was really driving the drinking, and then you're finally like, I can't handle this, I've had enough.
The one thing there are two things to deal with. One was I'm into New Age spirituality, so I, a lot of breath work and the Buddhism. So I do meditate, and I do prana breath work when I'm having anxiety attacks. So that was one of it. The other thing at that time was my doctor put me on Xanax, which helped a little bit, but Xanax is very addictive, and I did not want to stay on that.
Yeah.
So I had to find other coping mechanisms. The other thing was watching Amy Schumer had a baby. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that, but she and her husband were going through the birth of their first child, and he was diagnosed with autism during that documentary. And boy, did I relate to him. And so when I went and I got diagnosed right when we moved out here, I had also broken my ankle in 3 places and had a plate put in my leg. So I was housebound, but got diagnosed. Didn't really think much of the ADHD, but the autism was what made me understand myself a little bit better and how to deal with things, and how addiction is a huge comorbidity of having autism, or for people who are on ADHD. So, and when you got both of them, boy, isn't that a lot. But yeah, so I had an interesting time with that. I really didn't get into my ADHD diagnosis until 6 months ago, when I realized that I have something called RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. That's where I think I'm rejection based. So everything with work was I'm getting rejected, and the emotions that come up are so intense that I go into panic attack and anxiety, and I want to reach for a drink. Like you said, if alcohol's on the table, guess what?
Right.
I want to reach for that drink. I've had to kind of push that out of myself. So if there's alcohol on the table and I'm stressed, I have a bedroom to go back to that has a very peaceful Zen environment for me.
Yeah.
And I just turn the lights on, burn some incense, light a candle, put my headsets on, turn the noise canceling on, and just zen out to some really good alpha relaxation stuff.
Yeah.
Just created a whole coping room for yourself.
Yes, exactly.
That is brilliant.
That's
I think that is
super
so great. And I'm really glad that you shared that, because that's the kind of thing people need to hear. Like that is something that everybody needs. I've kind of done the same thing with my own bedroom, so I can relate to that.
Well, cool. What I hear there is like I know I'm on the autism spectrum. I know I'm on the ADHD spectrum. I understand these are some of the things. I even have a rejection dysphoria, but I'm still capable of creating a space that's going to work for me through a bunch of the things that you've learned. Like you've learned a bunch of coping mechanisms, and now you're using them to benefit yourself, as opposed to, I guess, drink it away, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I've chosen a different thing to help me cope and relax and de-stress rather than going to a bottle of stuff that makes me feel numb. I get more anxiety from that in the morning, and I can't think straight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was the huge thing with me. I couldn't do my job sometimes, you know, and it was starting to show. And then you get, anyway, it's a whole other story. It's a bullying story.
I'm gonna throw this question out there to you guys really quick. I hear a lot from a lot of people when they talk about relapsing and dealing with just, I don't know, all the thoughts that come with it. So one thing people really struggle with if they do relapse is intense shame and regret, and they get buried in that to the point where it really holds them in a drinking pattern, because when you don't know how to deal with shame and regret, what do? Right? And then that voice in your head is like, well, you're only at 5 days now, so you might as well just start over again because you lost it all. I mean, we all know how that voice kicks in. I know for me personally, like, I can look back now and I can say I don't have any shame or regret over my relapse. What happened had to happen for me to get to where I'm at now. I wouldn't wish a relapse on anybody, but damn, did I need that lesson. And it was a really horrible, painful lesson. So what are your guys' thoughts when we think about somebody who's really struggling with the shame and really trying to fight that voice? What would you say to them?
What, Patty?
We both sort of took a breath. I saw. First of all, every woman I spoke to when I was writing my book talked about the shame. So the initial piece for all, and myself included, is to hide it and not want to talk about it. And in lots of recovery circles, not just in AA or NA, in lots of recovery circles, even though there is a sort of, you know, the revolving door and you're always welcome, but there are a lot of meetings where there is a lot of shame. Oh, you decided to come back. Oh, that kind of thing that's just blaming and shaming. And so it kept a lot of people that I spoke to away. And I wouldn't go back to the meeting that I left in the first place. As I mentioned in the other podcast with you guys, I met a woman and I said, I'm looking for a nurturing group that focuses on emotional sobriety that is going to hold me and create that connection. I don't want to go back to the, oh, you decided to find your way back. You know, this is a small town. I used to run into people from the meeting and they'd say, haven't seen you in a while. Let us know when you decide to come back. And, you know, that kind of shit that is just more shame, more guilt. And I was carrying extra because of the first time I got sober, I was doing it to not be my mother. So when I looked in the mirror, I saw my mother and I felt the guilt and the shame of doing it, quote unquote, to my kids. And it's so laden. And then again, if you don't find some tools, I loved what Dave described. That's just awesome. If you don't find some tools in which to find that peaceful place, it's just being trapped. And it's like, how do I deal with this? Well, I know one tool that works. You know, Gabor Mate describes it. Drinking is not where you need to be looking. You need to look at what caused it. You know, we're all drinking to numb out from the trauma that caused it or whatever it is that's behind it. And so if we're not dealing with that, it's just like, that's our go-to, man. I know this will numb. I know this will work. So yeah, that you need to find that community that will be supportive to create that connection that will support you in not drinking. And that was huge for me.
And with, you know, what I usually say when I see somebody relapse in the IAS app is you'll see one thing at the end of everything I say. I always have my hands together, and I always put a heart, and I always put a hug, because a lot of people need that. They need that recognition, the validation of what they're going through. And what I like to say to people is, one, to me, recovery is the journey, and sobriety is our state of mind in the moment. So we are sober on a daily or hourly minute basis, but we are recovering. So we're on that recovery. Don't discount the recovery journey you've had to this time. Be compassionate with yourself. Step back and realize, okay, I relapsed. I've got it this time. This time, I'm going forward, but don't carry the shame. I mean, it's not worth it. We're not judging you here. That's what I like about that app. We're not judging. We're here to support you, and whatever that takes. If you need to talk, you need to go to a Zoom. If, you guys have a great one on Monday night that I still need to come to. I go to the Sobertown Zooms, the Rewired Zooms. Those are fun too, but I don't get a lot of time to do that. But if I can stop by the app and give somebody just a little hint of, you see me, I share these tarot cards every day, the Osho Zen Tarots. Whenever I get a chance, I share those. Because usually that's what I draw in the morning. I'm like, oh my God, this fits today. So I share it out there. And if anybody has the same inkling, then they can kind of vent on there or whatever. But I always get back to them on their posts and say, hey, thanks for coming by. And, hope everything's okay with you. And if you're on Telegram, look me up here if you ever need to talk, or, you ever need your chart done, that kind of stuff, because I do astrology on the side. And, just that kind of fun stuff. So, it just helps people get through that shame point, I think, is what it is. It's once you can get through that, because I used to have it too. I'd be so shameful of myself for relapsing. But once you can get through that and be honest with yourself, I think that's where the tipping point is. And you just kind of go, okay, now I can move on, but I want a community and I want to help people. So that's where I sit.
That connection is just vital. And finding that group of people that aren't blaming you, shaming you further, guilt tripping you, all of that stuff, finding that where you feel that embrace and that connection. Again, it is about connection. That's what we're all seeking.
And that's a big thing. It's find the right connection, not just go to a meeting, right? And I'm not an AA person. I know, Patti, it's been great for you. And we all have different things that have worked for us. But it drives me freaking crazy when someone is like, I relapsed and I don't know what to do. And the answer is just go to a meeting, go to a meeting, go to a meeting. It's go find the right place to show up.
It's the opposite of being heard, right?
Exactly.
I mean, when you relapse, one of the things you need, and I'm saying I'm going to come from a place of no relapse, because that's me. I've got 3.5 years, and this isn't part of my story. And which is why I've been super quiet. But one of the things that I feel like is when you've gone already that far, you're missing out. You're missing something in your life. And it's not just the meeting. The connection might be at the meeting, but you're missing something in your life that now you need to figure out what that is and how to get it. Somebody barking up your tree that says, just go and do this thing. It's got to come from that person. It can't come from the other way around, right? Like, I get it. But I heard someone say, unsolicited advice is the junk mail of your life.
Sorry, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, it was an incredible quote. And that's all that is.
Yeah.
And this is me coming from, like, I don't have a relapse, but it drives me bonkers too, because it's not, how are you doing? How can I help you?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
In that space, that's what I feel like if I was needing, that's somebody who's willing to listen.
That's right.
You said something really important there too, and that is that if you've gotten to the point of relapse, something is missing in your life.
Exactly.
It just is. And so, and Steve and I talk a lot about when someone does relapse, we ask them, like, find the lesson. What's the lesson in this relapse? Don't waste it. there's a lesson in there. And I think the answer is find what was missing. What is it that you have going on that you're not dealing with? What is it that, what's the big void in your life that is still not full? And start putting work towards that.
That's it.
For me, and Patti, it sounds like, your first round, you did a lot of work on yourself. You did the steps, you did all of that. For me, the first time I quit drinking, I did not do a damn thing. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't find anybody who was in recovery to show me the way on any level. I just quit drinking, and I didn't tell a soul. And so instead of doing the growth and doing the work and all of those things that we do when we quit drinking, I just sat there without drinking. That was it. So a big part of my story is the difference between sobriety and recovery, right? The second time around, I found these amazing people who could point things out like, hey, so it seems like you're really dealing with a lot of shame, or, it looks like you're really insecure about this, or like just helped me see the things in my life that I needed to work on. And that's the difference between the first time and the second time. That's why I feel like sobriety is possible this time, because I'm continuing to grow versus just sitting there, not drinking and wishing I could.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
exactly.
one of the questions you asked right at the beginning when you introed this, you talked about being shaken up when you see someone relapse. And from the outside perspective, because this is me, when I see someone relapse and I hear you all tell your story, that to me is something I need to hear. And I say that not because I feel like I'm anywhere close to the edge of a relapse. I say that because one of the common things that all of you talked about was complacency. You gave something up, you slowly slipped back into old habits, you had a sobriety, even though like Julie, you didn't do anything, you didn't talk to anybody, you just held on, you still had something because you had something to hold on to. So when I hear and I listen and I hear you talk, and Julie hears this from me all the time, that scares me. Listening to you all share, and I from the outside I can hear like the downfall and the slip, and then the darkness, and then the pulling yourself back out of the darkness. Apparently it's just harder the next time and the next time. Yep. And that comes from you guys, not me. I can't say that. I don't have that experience. I've got 3.5 years of straight sobriety, and your stories are something I think people in my boat that don't have the experience, because after you followed that up, Julie, about when you see someone, is how do I not do that?
Mm-hmm.
That there, for me, is how do I not go down the same road that you went down, because you learned lessons that if I can use the lessons that you learned, my goal is to not ever go back there.
Right.
That's my goal. And I'm sure that was your goal too. I don't ever want to do this again. And Patti, that was your goal at some point too. I don't ever want to do this again. And Dave, probably the same thing. Like, yep. That's the same message you tell yourself. And I'm saying this now. So it's the same. So I'm like, what are you doing?
For me, I saw a quote recently that I absolutely loved and that really resonated with me. And it was, love yourself enough that you don't want to escape. Love your life enough that you don't want to escape your life. Love yourself enough that you don't want to lose your life. And that's what it was for me, because literally getting sober the second time was really me looking at the mirror and saying, I don't like you when you drink. And Patti, I love you. I love you. I want you to be sober. I want you to do this for you. The first time I got sober, I didn't want to be my mother. I wanted to be sober for the children that I was going to have. I didn't want my husband to leave me. All of those. The second time was literally, I love myself enough that I don't want to do this to myself. And then when I did more of the research, I thought, fuck you, alcohol companies. This shit is toxic. Right. And no one's talking about that. And, we're killing ourselves with this. And so many people that don't get the gift of sobriety, of recovery. The cancer just, yeah, anyway, I won't go into all that. But that was a part of it too, is I don't want to do this to myself.
Yeah.
I love myself enough to not want to. So when I see someone relapsing, to answer that question, Steve, my very first response is compassion, empathy, and a desire to do service, to say, how can we get you to a point where you don't want to escape it anymore? What do you need to do to walk into that place of loving yourself enough that you don't want to be numb? And again, that goes back to Gabor Mate's thing about, it's not the alcohol, it's what you're using the alcohol to escape.
And it's one of those things that you don't see until you do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It can't be given to you. It's not a gift. I can't wrap it in a bow. I can't give you that self-confidence. It's gotta come from doing. I know my own version of self-love is doing things I know that are good for me on a regular basis. And that gives me confidence, and that's given me my own self-worth. And that is me proving to myself that I love me, Steve. That's what that is. Dave creating his room.
Yeah.
That is absolutely a form of self-love and self-care. That's just incredible.
Yeah.
And from a neurodiverse point of view, from my point of view, the thing that, and I've noticed this with my boys, sometimes you got to touch the stove a bunch of times before it sticks,
Yeah.
And that's what was going on with me with, when I started in 2021 and all the way up to 2023. I would go a set period of time and then relapse and then go back, so it was touching the stove. You say it that way, but it was touching the stove so many times.
Yeah.
You get burned and you realize I'm not loving myself either.
The stove is
Patty said is huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I have one more question that I want to ask you guys. And this is kind of from a perspective of someone that I talked to recently who was listening to someone tell their personal story about relapsing after 10 years. And the thought that just weighed on her was, oh my God, this literally never ends. What would you say to someone that's hit with that? That you guys know that feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to someone when they're hit with that, like, no matter what I do, there's still going to be more?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it echoes into, 12 step a day at a time, a minute at a time, a second at a time. Of course, it echoes into that. But I'm gonna go back to that thing of, well, life never ends. I mean, until it ends. But and life happens. So things don't change. It's just how we're dealing with that stuff that changes. So what are the tools that I'm going to use as life is happening? Because painful shit keeps happening. And so we're picking up the tools. Dave's room, for me, it's practicing creativity, whatever that looks like. It's journaling, it's drawing, it's whatever form of creativity. That's where I go. And that's vital. And to me, that's a connection to that higher self, is what creativity is, which is, this turns some people off, but to me, it's a spiritual problem in that life happens. So how do we connect to that larger place?
Mm-hmm.
Because in my opinion, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is that's taking us out of life is not dealing with the problem. Whereas if we're dealing with life and life is happening, I have to connect to that larger self, that larger essence in order to handle life as it happens.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not better myself.
Dave's like, I don't need to say it.
Well, that was awesome. I mean, I'll add one thing to it, because I haven't swore it through this whole thing. I need to.
Please do, otherwise I look terrible.
Yeah, just drop it.
There's a great meditation out online you can go get. It's called The Honest Meditation. It's a 2-minute thing on YouTube. The guy's a marketing guy. He's brilliant with it. He created an app that's like, you can go to the 2, 5, 10, 15-minute versions of it. And it's hysterical. But one of the lines I just absolutely laugh is, when the 3-ring shit show that is your life, breathe in, peace, breathe out, bullshit. It's epic to me. It was one of the first things that was helping me through some of this stuff. So I speak very highly.
That's fantastic.
You gotta have a good sense to me, you gotta have a good sense of humor through all this stuff too.
Yeah.
I have a tendency that when I'm in a stressful situation at work, I start laughing. And my new boss loves that. Boss did not, so it was quite a switch lately.
Yeah.
And what sound wonderful is my new boss doesn't drink.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's
great.
Because he's had issues with his family doing this. He just never did that in his life. So, I hand it to him for doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's anyway, I'm right there with, to me, it's opening up, I open up to the universe or to God or whatever you want to call it. Everybody has different name for the source. I always like when Wayne Dyer's whole thing, he says all those things, he calls it source, which is kind of a cool thing as well. And I think once you find that connection, it's soul opening. It's, not just eye opening, but it helps you connect more with yourself. You start loving yourself a little bit more. So
yeah, absolutely.
The whole thing of the relapse equation is out there. Some people are going to hit it, some people aren't. And I think it's all in how much you keep a little bit of a keeper at the gateway of your mind and also at the gateway of your heart and soul. So,
yeah.
Oh, that just
beautiful
makes me think about when Julie always talks about authenticity, because he just explained it, authenticity, in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
Being the gatekeeper of your mind and your heart, and showing up as real as you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we can do that everywhere. And Lord knows I try.
Yeah.
When you talk about spirituality, which is an episode that we have to do.
Yeah.
It's still on the list. It's one of the ones we haven't touched yet. It's one of those things, I think, that grows on you. And eventually you find it, and it finds you right at the right time, and it changes, and it helps. All of this is like so much about impermanence, which could be all on a topic all on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is change. But I'm going to go on my own little rant. I think I'm just going to wrap things up here. First, I want to thank you guys for sharing your experiences about relapse. From someone that I said earlier doesn't have this experience, sitting and listening to it is super valuable for me. And I hope our listeners can find the value in that. And if you're on the same road as me, or if you've relapsed a whole bunch of times, I hope you heard something that you needed to hear today. When, Patti, you talked about that that arrogance led you back, and the complacency I mentioned earlier too, that all of you have a different experience that has the same word explains all of it, right? Is that complacency. We didn't go on this big time, but we all worry about a ginormous life event, something, sadness or whatever it is, that it's going to trigger my relapse. And none of you shared a ginormous life event that triggered your relapse. And I think when it comes to me, like, a big life event triggers me, even though it triggers, to look at my recovery stuff. It's like, it's obvious that I need to do these things because all of the red flags and bells are going off. At least I'm making the attempt. It is this gentle slide and slope that led you to that spot. If we talked about the shame of coming back from that, I think there's so much stigma, and this is something that goes through my mind now, but there's so much stigma around it. But if we don't talk about it, then we enable the stigma.
Right.
And so I urge you to talk about it, even if it hurts, even if it stings. There's a whole bunch of people that are willing to love you right now out here somewhere. Reach out, talk about it, find a safe space, because there is light at the end of the tunnel. I want to say thank you, Patti. Thank you, Dave, for saying this. Recovery is the journey. Sobriety is a state of mind. I love that. So
I
thank
love
you.
that too.
Thank you for being on the podcast. Really appreciate your sharing your experiences and your time. Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be here.
Thanks for joining us today. Make sure you check out our website at throughtheglassrecovery.com for more episodes and tons of other free resources to help your recovery journey.